Oh man, this one is so long. Wait, no, it's not. It's only 17. Okay. Okay, actually, this is short for Mentis. Okay, this is good. This will only take me 1 hour. All right. Here we go. We got the Mentis video. A lot of people wanted me to watch. It's actually an old video, but it's about clarifying the physical removal concept because I wanted to know more about libertarianism, like Hoppian libertarianism, because I think that like before I did consider myself libertarian for like a long time. Like honestly, I've never been one to like really worry about labels. I don't really care about labels. I don't like being labeled. So I but you know, if I did like have to say like which ideology like kind of resonated with me like when I was younger, it would have been libertarianism. And I think you know, obviously I moved away from that for the reasons I've said before, that I think that like we have to care more about like the social cohesion aspect of a society, as much as like I personally like being, you know, living like a forest witch lifestyle where I don't really you know, I just like to walk in the woods and stuff. That's like my thing. And eventually I'm planning on moving to like even deeper into the woods, like eventually when I have like a little bit more money and I can do that. I want to move like even deeper away from society. And yeah, I'm just a very like I just kind of like to be left alone. But I do you know, again, like I realize that you need social cohesion in order to function as a country. So I think that's kind of what pushed me away from it. But apparently like there are some other like forms of libertarianism that don't remove that. So I would like to watch this video by Mentis about it. All right, here we go.
Hey internets, so in this video I'm
Hey,
going to be
Mentis.
clarifying what is probably one of the most heavily misunderstood ideological concepts you may have seen on the internet, and that is the true meaning of physical removal, specifically as it is referred to as by Hans-Hermann Hoppe, who you may or may not have heard of. But for those of you who don't know, Hans-Hermann Hoppe is a leading intellectual of the Mises Institute and Austrian economics. Now this video is not intended to be about the life and times of Hoppe, so I'll just be brief on this introduction. If you haven't heard of him, I recommend googling him and checking out some of his books, a lot of which you can actually get for free and are available on the Mises Institute.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, back to physical removal. Now, before getting into what physical removal is, you kind of have to go into what physical removal is not, because unfortunately there's a lot of memes out there on the internet that aren't exactly accurate, funny and based as they may be. So first off, no, physical removal does not literally mean grabbing communists and then throwing them out of helicopters into the ocean. That's just the meme. In fact, it doesn't really have anything to do with these alleged free helicopter rides at all. So no, physical removal is not some magic loophole in libertarian thought which allows them to act as the aggressor in situations and round people up you happen to dislike against their will and we'll just say delete them from the simulation. Nope, that is not what physical removal is.
Okay.
Sorry if you thought otherwise. Sorry if you took the memes literally. That's not the way. It is not some weird dog whistle. It is not some obscure or cryptic call to violence. Physical removal is none of these things. For the most part, at least. There is an extremely unlikely to happen hypothetical scenario that would allow someone to throw a commie out of a helicopter under the pretense of physical removal, which I will go over at the end of this video after I've explained everything so it all makes sense, but spoiler alert, it involves self-defense pretty much. So anyways, what actually is physical removal then? Well, physical removal really just means to be physically distant. Or in other words, ways to physically distance yourselves from those who are incompatible with yourself and incompatible with society.
When I was a little kid, this was my favorite game. Except I didn't play it how it was supposed to be played. There was a level that had like these little like caves, and I pretended it was like a Yoshi hotel, and I would like go to each of those little rooms in a cave, and I would talk to like the shark and be like, how's your room, sir? Is everything okay? Okay. And then I would like walk away and I would go to the next room. I was like, oh, okay, here's your room service, sir. I would just do that.
It is the recognition of the fact that
It was so stupid. Like, I think back on it, I'm like, man, that's like so
a free
cringe.
society, specifically a free society that, actually cares about maintaining the freedom it has, that society cannot tolerate the presence of those who wish to take their freedom away, and thus they must be ostracized and exiled to preserve the libertarian order. Physical removal then recognizes that the libertarian...
I did that for hours, by the way. Like, I would play that game like a lot. It was like playing house, it was like playing house, like Dollhouse, but it was like in a game. It was
concepts of property rights and freedom of association creates a means to an end to actually make this a real thing and have an actual viable strategy to both create and maintain said libertarian free society. And it is this recognition of property rights and freedom of association that means that property owners therefore have the right to exclude troublemakers from their property, and by extension covenant communities have the right to exclude those troublemakers from their society entirely. Now, to people who are not already familiar with various concepts from the Austrian School of Economics, which Hoppe comes from, everything I just said can sound somewhat confusing. So here's an extremely simplified example I thought of to make things easy.
okay.
Imagine that you are the owner of a house with a 1-acre garden and a white picket fence around it. Pretty simple property. Now, let's say a commie with a megaphone decides to hop your fence and he starts spouting off a whole slew of ridiculous commie propaganda and just in general being an annoying visitor. And you don't want him there. You want him to leave. So how do you get this commie off your property? Do you instantly press the McNuke button and fire it off at him? No, you do not do the recreational McNukes. What you do is you start with the least violent way to get somebody off of your property. And you'd only escalate based on how much pushback
get the hell off my
this invader
property.
gives you. So for instance, you would start with saying that, hey commie, you are not welcome here. The commie, being an annoying commie, of course, completely ignores you and continues to intrude upon your property. And he just kind of looks at you at your polite request for him to leave, and he just kind of laughs at you and goes right back to his megaphone. So then you can escalate by saying, hey, if you don't leave, I'm going to activate physical removal bot, Tesla droid, and he will chuck you off the property. The commie continues to sneer at you and laugh as he continues to intrude upon your property and spew communist propaganda. At that point, you are finally in the right to activate physical removal bot and have him chucked over your picket fence. Now, in the instance that the commie is really, really stupid and decides to jump right back over the fence, you are then in the right to escalate things further from there. But in order to keep this YouTube friendly, I'm just going to let you imagine how far escalations can go. However, the key detail, the main point that you need to remember here is that you have to be the actual owner of this property that this is taking place on. You have to be the rightful owner of this area, and thus you have an ethical right to kick people off your property if you don't want them there. This is pretty much the basis of freedom of association. This is also why the abolition of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is something that's really important to the libertarian right, because if you don't have freedom of association, certain problems can occur with this. For example, let's reimagine this hypothetical scenario, but instead of living in a libertarian free society, let's just say that you live in the United States of America and how it currently operates. So instead of pressing a button and summoning physical removal bot, you instead call the police and tell them that you have an intruder on your property. And so the police, they do come, and let's say they actually take your side and they do physically remove the commie, as he is trespassing and refusing to leave. But then later down the line, you get served with a lawsuit that informs you that the commie, as it turns out, identifies as a member of a protected class trademark. And the commie, of course, claims that he feels like the reason you kicked him off of the property was in fact a hate crime of you discriminating against him or her or Zir or Zibba Zuba Zaba or whatever, and therefore you are guilty of a hate crime. And thus you are forced to show up at court at gunpoint due to the threat of default judgment over something that is completely bogus and shouldn't even be a law. If you're interested in hearing this in more detail, you can watch my video on civil rights if you haven't already done so. But the basic
Mentis has a lot of good videos.
Removes freedom of association. And to make matters worse, the way that civil rights laws are actually enforced...
This is like the kind of shit I'd like watch on my own time. Well, I used to watch a lot of these videos on my own time. I kind of stopped. The reason why I stopped watching a lot of these videos on my own time is because like I could just watch it with you guys. Because I watch so many videos with you guys, I might as well do it then and then watch like stupid shit like anime in my own time, you know?
It's not based on equality as it claims, but rather civil rights laws are actually enforced as equity. Simply doing something that has an adverse or disparate outcome, someone who claims to be a member of a protected class, can count as discrimination, even when there's no proof whatsoever of any kind of discriminatory intent. So the TLDR here is that the most extremely basic idea of physical removal is that with property rights and freedom of association, you have the right to exile people you
like
do not
literally
wish to associate
anybody
with from your property. And
literally
nobody
anyone,
owes anyone any kind of explanation whatsoever for why they wish to not associate with someone. But again, this is just the basic idea of physical removal. It actually goes quite a bit further than this, once you consider the community as a whole, or in other words, once you consider the fact that, as it turns out, we live in a society. So let's imagine the exact same scenario, except this time the annoying commie has come back, and he has instead decided to move into the property next door to you, and has thus evolved from annoying trespassing commie to annoying neighbor. Fantastic. And this is where things can get, well, really annoying, because now the commie continues to spew his communist rhetoric from his megaphone, just loud enough that you can barely hear it to be annoyed by it, but he isn't technically intruding upon you or otherwise aggressing upon you in any direct.
See, this is why the solution is that you buy like a giant like two digit acre property in the middle of buttfuck Egypt, and then you build your house right in the center, and then nobody can fuck with you.
Measurable way. Furthermore, he has converted his home into a prostitution/crack den and regularly invites his commie crack friends over, creating a ridiculously loud and obnoxious.
Why Egypt? But so not literal Egypt, M. Perry. When I used to play Rust, so I used to play like the original Rust, like old school, like Radbear Rust, and old Rust basically. There was a mountain range in the back. And the mountain range, if there was a way that you could kind of go up into this up into this path in the mountain range, and then if you went over the back of it, there was nothing there. So it was just like a big expanse of nothingness. Like there's just like some trees and flat plains and nothing, and like a couple hills. There was like literally nothing. It was just like infinite nothingness. And we called that buttfuck Egypt. And it's where you would build like it's where a lot of like kind of people in the server would build their bases in order to hide them, because you wouldn't build them like in the area where, you know, airdrops were going off and people farmed. Like you would build your base somewhere hidden in what everyone called buttfuck Egypt, and it was just this random like middle of nowhere place. You had to like basically it was like hard to like bring people there basically. Yeah.
Just hive of degeneracy. Your once peaceful mountain getaway home is now a place of misery as a result of this terrible neighbor. Basically, he's making your life a living hell, and there isn't anything you can think of at first that you can really do to stop him. Now, you can try being a bad neighbor right back in his face without aggressing on him, and you can try ostracizing him and shunning him and refusing to do any financial business with him, basically being a bad neighbor right back. But the problem is, that's probably not enough on your own. What if the commie just decides he doesn't care about what you do, and instead he just laughs and sneers at you from his property on his side of the fence? Let's say this commie now has decided that he gets an extreme psychic benefit from making your life miserable. However, he makes sure to still stick to the NAP. He does not aggress upon you or commit violence against you or your property. So he's sticking to the non-aggression rules, but he's instead deliberately sitting right on the edge of the nap and acts like the most irritating and provocative person he possibly can without crossing that line. Of course, the crackheads that he invites over to his den absolutely are aggressing on you and absolutely breaking the nap and regularly try to steal your stuff and sell it to buy more crack, because, well, that's just what crackheads do. And when you complain to your neighbor about it, and you complain about his crack friends, he of course just pretends to care. Oh, so sorry you got robbed, neighbor, but my friends are their own person, and I don't condone what they are doing, and you'll just have to take it up with them, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And of course, you can tell that he absolutely enjoys the fact that his crack friends are robbing you, but again, since it's not him directly, you still are technically not in the ethical right to nuke him for it, as tempting as that might be right now. And you can tell that he wants you to aggress on him, actually, because again, he's spewing communist
This is like the no touching can't get mad thing that kids did, where you go up in someone's face and then you basically put your hands like right in front of their face, and then you like wiggle your hands back and forth. Like, no touching, can't get mad. No touching, can't get mad. And you just do that to people.
Rhetoric. He wants you to do something that looks bad so we can videotape it and say, look what I mean. We commies are victims of society. We need to rise up and install communism. In other words, he is provoking you and being a crybaby towards you on purpose. In this scenario, you have become a victim of something known as mid-level violence. This is a common provocative tactic used by Marxists, where they are as cruel as they can possibly get away with without crossing aggressive boundaries, and without crossing any legal lines. And if you try to stop them, they will immediately cry victimhood and paint you as the bad guy. But if you do nothing, then the demoralization is complete, and the communist propaganda and degeneracy gets to push its agenda and message along further. further, completely uncontested until they have gained enough power and following to basically destroy your free society from within. Needless to say, this type of cowardly behavior cannot be tolerated in any libertarian society that wishes to maintain itself. Or, in other words, again, we have come to the conclusion and realization that tolerance of commie degenerates is high time preference behavior. If you tolerate this kind of behavior for prolonged periods of time, they will eventually destroy you, because their ultimate goal is to get rid of any social boundaries of the NAP entirely. Because again, most societies today are just kind of liberal pseudo-democracies. The world we actually live in isn't perfect, but it is better than some alternatives. One thing that most Western first world countries at least get semi-right is they do, to some degree, protect people's property rights. And they do, to some degree, kind of enforce something similar to the NAP. Not really, but close enough in many circumstances. For example, if you live in a first world country in modern day, you
can't like stand outside someone. There's like noise ordinances and like harassment ordinances, so you can't just like actually literally do this, where you stand out there with a megaphone and you scream at people. Like that's actually illegal.
Can at least usually rely on the police and your local detective agencies to open up an investigation if someone gets murdered. They will at least try to find out who done it. They might not do it the most efficiently, but they'll make an attempt. Likewise, if someone comes in and steals your stuff, the police will at least let you file a report, and they'll make usually some kind of attempt to catch the criminals, if they can at least. And if someone is trespassing on your property, police will usually help you exiled, assuming you aren't living in one of those DNC cities that believes in idiotic things like squatters' right. Then you have the opposite problem, anarcho-tyranny, but that's a video for another day. Anyways, the point is that the communist doesn't believe in private property rights. He'll only pretend that he cares about those rights as long as he's living in a society that defends those rights. His ultimate goal is to get rid of them entirely, which is why mid-level violence is something that they love to do so much. It's something that's very effective because they can just play the victim over and over and over again, and they don't really care because, again, they don't actually care about private rights. Their ultimate goal is to tear down the hierarchy. The point, again, is that if you tolerate these people for a long enough time, they're gonna destroy your society. It is, again, cowardly behavior. It cannot be tolerated in any libertarian order that wants to maintain itself for any amount of time. Left libertarians, those who believe in
it's kind of like doxing and harassment are kind of like similar, right? Although like I think that doxing is becoming like illegal. But that was like something before that people could do, and you can't really do anything about it, right? They're just like, well, like I just have, I'm just posting something online. It has nothing to do with it. I don't want any. I'm not saying I want any violence done, but I'm just posting it. Teehee. There's stuff like that. Yeah.
Live and let live.
Like for an example, like kind of stuff that's like going on with like Kirsha right now, where like she's kind of like living in like a kind of scared situation right now because of this, right? Yeah.
And civil rights liberal nonsense have no answer whatsoever to mid-level violence. This is the problem. The NAP is not being violated, therefore they must allow themselves to be demoralized again.
And again, like this also has happened to like people like Asmongold, right? Where they will do like some kind of like kind of basically soliciting like people to deal with people, deal with like Asmongold, for instance, and then saying like T is just a joke, right? Yeah, it's basically like that.
And again and again and again until they've eventually
what's his name, Denims did that, for instance, right? That's kind of like, yeah, it's basically they toe the line to not get in trouble, but it's clearly it's clearly an action with violent intent, but then it's not against the law, so then they can do it.
Lost. So what we're really seeing here in this scenario is the unfortunate reality that the NAP is not a complete philosophy when it comes to maintaining social order. It is not
lawful evil. Yeah, exactly.
A complete legal system. The non-aggression principle works absolutely fantastic for people who live far away from you and in entirely different societies from you and entirely different cultures from you. In other words, the NAP makes for fantastic foreign policy, but it is unfortunately not a complete system for dealing with people who live right next door to each other or even in the same system and society as each other. The live and let live mentality that you get from just the NAP alone is far too tolerant and enabling of degenerate and other forms of unreasonably high time preference behavior and short-term thinking, or in other words, or just in layman's terms, idiotic behavior, and a free society that wishes to maintain itself as a free society must therefore lay additional ground rules and practice the fine art of physical removal. And thus, the commies and other troublemakers who would sow the seeds of degeneracy and societal destruction must be exiled from your community. And this is where right libertarians and Hoppians, on the other hand, come in and do have an answer to the commie trash neighbor problem. This is where the covenant community and private city model comes in, because we understand that modern Western society unfortunately has completely screwed up on this, as we've effectively allowed communists to infiltrate our intellectual institutions where they have been for decades reshaping those institutions in their image, resulting in a system that values and gives prestige to those pledging adherence to the socialist ideology and regime instead of actually, truth. Or as some would say, Marxists walked out of the streets and into the universities where they are canonizing their lies as reality as we speak. So how do you get rid of them in a manner that doesn't involve giving in to their mid-level violence traps? Important question, isn't it? Well, you see, you alone ostracizing and shunning and refusing to do any financial business with your bad neighbor might just be pissing the wind to him. He can easily shrug it off, or he can just flat out not care. But what if everyone in the local community, including those with significantly more financial say than you, also join in the ostracization? Or in other words, you organize a total boycott of your bad neighbor until he is forced to leave and physically dist himself by moving to a community that better fits and accepts his ideals, like the ocean. Okay, just kidding. But on a more serious note, an even better solution is no one ever even selling that plot of land to the commie in the first place, so that it's not even ever a problem. Yeah, that's right. You'd want to be a part of a community that recognizes that this kind of person is someone that you wouldn't even want to be living there ever. So Hoppian libertarians, or as we sometimes like to call ourselves, libertarians who live in reality and not la-la land, understand the case for free trade and restricted immigration. Not everyone is compatible with the community that they are applying to live with. Again, I'd like to call out my example of Islam is right about women. Muslims who actually practice Islam seriously are not ideologically compatible with those who believe in Western ideas of feminism. An Islamic private community is therefore completely justified in not wanting to live around Western feminists. It makes perfect sense for a free society to be choosy in who they allow to live with them. In other words, proactive physical removal is often the best physical removal. So under the right libertarianism way, it is thus understood that any free market libertarian society to be hypothetically built in the future, in practice, would of course be comprised of thousands of these private communities, covenant communities, which are built on the...
This is kind of, by the way, the concept behind like having to vet people culturally before you let them immigrate to America.
Backs of
is that you don't want people that aren't really culturally assimilatable
and virtue-based similarities of the people who choose to build and be a part of that community and the values that form it, which would come with additional codes of conduct in addition to the NAP. And the idea would be to find a community that agrees with your virtues and your culture, thus making the freedom of association a two-way handshake, and ensuring that the communists can only seethe and cope from far, far away. And of course, they're free to make their attempts at creating their society based on aggression-backed communal ownership of the means of production, and it can fail yet again for the millionth time. Good for them. This worldview of physical removal is strictly opposed to the delusional egalitarian way, which tries to take the postmodernist route and pretend that all cultures are ideologically equal, and thus compatible, and thus there's no such thing as a bad neighbor in their mind, even though this has been proven time and time again to be false. Now, if you want to see an example of this in practice today, a start would be the Orania Project. This is a South African town which only sells land to those who are Afghanis and have no criminal record and share the town's culture and values. Surprise, surprise, the town has actually been pretty financially successful. And while Orania is not perfect since it's still technically existing off the back of the Republic of South Africa state, it exists in spite of the state rather than because of it. And a similar private community could easily exist in its own financial rights. Or to TLDR it, physical removal is both the logical conclusion and most
Did you guys hear they tried to do this in Texas? I don't know if it was in the news, but they tried to do like a private, they tried to do a private community in Texas that was like specifically Islamic, like a Sharia. They tried to do a Sharia community, and it got freaking orbital striked. Yeah, they basically said you can't do that.
Of property rights and freedom of association is the refusal of those who care about maintaining a society which allows for a free market to tolerate those who don't, as well as the application of self-defense of one's property when it is within your rights. So then that brings me to what I teased at the beginning of this video. When can physical removal actually result in a commie being thrown out of a helicopter? It's pretty simple really, but unfortunately not as funny as some of the memes. Say you own a company which offers helicopter tours, and one of the passengers, wearing a hammer and sickle shirt, suddenly has a random mental breakdown, pulls out a knife, and starts attacking other passengers. You happen to be on board this flight as part of the tour and find yourself by random chance in the perfect position to shove this murderous rascal out of your helicopter. Yeah, like I said, it would basically only happen under a self-defense scenario.
Yep.
Again, not as funny as the memes, but hopefully this video has driven the point across for you. Physical removal is not an aggressive action in the way that the Austrian school defines aggression, at least, but rather it's more like a combination of ostracization, exile, and self-defense in compliance with the Austro-libertarian views of property rights. It is more comparable to a safe for work internet forum banning someone for posting 18+ content, or say a bar bouncer or security guard kicking out some drunken idiots who get into a fight from the establishment, than it is comparable to helicopters. Sorry if that ruins it for people who thought Hoppe was edgier than he actually is, but it's an important concept to understand. Physical removal really just...
The funny thing is actually a lot of places like take California, for example, they make it very hard for you to actually defend yourself. A lot of people don't. There's a lot of people in certain commie ideological circles that don't even believe in self-defense. It's kind of weird.
Provides a way to defend your property and the society you live in from those who would seek to degenerate it and to destroy it from within, by basically refusing to put up with their crap and finding ways to distance them as far away from the community as possible. Anyways, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment, or leave a tip for my Ko-Fi if you really enjoyed it. Till next time.
I guess like one thing it kind of reminds me of a little bit is like private schools, like especially like Christian private schools. They don't like they actually ban you from like they actually will not they will expel you basically for certain actions that like aren't really illegal, but they just don't want it in the community. Like for instance, if you get an abortion, they kick you out. Did you guys know about that? In like private Catholic school? They kick you out if you get an abortion. If you get pregnant, they're okay with that. They're okay with like you get pregnant and you have the kids, like whatever, right? They don't care. But if you get an abortion, you get expelled. Yeah. So it's kind of similar. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that was it. You know, I guess I just have to like maybe read one of Hoppe's. I wonder if there's any audiobooks like you know, maybe I should just ask him. Yeah, maybe I should just ask him. You guys think I should ask him? Should I just DM Mentis and just like, ask for a recommendation? What do you guys think? For a book, like what book recommendation for like more of Hoppe? Yeah, I might ask him later.